Welcome back to the Weird and Strong podcast, folks. I am your host, Jeremy Grunsteiner, and we've got an amazing musician that I have had the pleasure to get to know over the past year. We've got John Ryder on the show, the mastermind behind Ghostmade, Cellophane, and Empires of Delirium. We talk about his path as a musician, where that has taken him both geographically, musically, and artistically, and also what's coming up for him in the future. So stay tuned and let's get weird. Welcoming John Ryder to the Weird and Strong podcast. How you doing, man?
You know, I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing real well. It's great to see you again. It's been about a month and a half since we've seen each other, and I'm glad that you're here. And I have a weird question for you. Are you ready?
Yeah, shoot.
Is a quesadilla a grilled cheese sandwich?
I would say no.
Okay, why?
I would say no. I think a grilled cheese sandwich is like brother and sister with like a melt.
Okay.
And it's a type of like grain breaded material that's different.
Okay.
I feel like if you did like tortilla, it's just a different type of family of grain. Yeah, I think that's how I would differentiate the two.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you made a grilled cheese sandwich with potato bread, would it still count as a grilled cheese sandwich?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's the overall like end texture of like how the bread is like risen from like bread versus like a tortilla.
Sure. So like if you made it with a pita, it wouldn't count. It'd be like
it'd be closer to the tortilla.
Yeah.
I feel.
Yeah.
I actually like low key worked in a bakery for like 3 years. So maybe I have a slight bias to that, but
like, so leavened versus unleavened. And that's the determination for the grilled cheese sandwich for you.
For me. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. What about you?
Well, this is a complicated question for me. It's like, I would say, yeah, it's a grilled cheese sandwich, but ultimately it's also a salad.
A salad?
Yeah.
How's it a salad?
So the definition of a salad, one of the definitions of a salad is any incongruous mixture.
Oh.
So like any mixture of ingredients is technically a salad. And so because it's not suspended in liquid, which would be a soup, it means that a quesadilla is a salad. So any of you wanting to get into your extra salads, just know a quesadilla is also a salad.
Yeah.
There's a very fun GitHub repository that talks about this, which is salad theory. So proposing that all things in the universe are either a soup or a salad based on their suspension in a liquid. So human beings could be postulated as walking soups or walking salads, depending on how you argue the point based off of their criteria, which is just fun thought experiments that people can run and play around with. Like the definition of words gets real weird.
It does.
Yeah.
I'm definitely a soup.
You're definitely a soup?
Yeah, probably something spicy.
Feeling like a spicy soup today?
Yeah. Some spicy ramen.
Yeah.
Terrible for the butthole. I'm just saying.
That's great. Awesome, man. Let's talk more about you.
Okay.
You know, for those that haven't been formally introduced to you, this is your ability to be able to share what makes John weird. What are the ways that you've shown up unconventionally in the world? What does that path look like for you?
Well, obviously I'm very much into the music aspect of life. And I feel like, I kind of came in as an outcast into like, I'm from Minneapolis, but like the Minnesota music scene, because I spent so much time in Los Angeles and some time up in Fargo. And I kind of came in out of left field with like, I can video edit, I can, use Photoshop, record most of my own stuff, mix, master most of my own stuff. From like a omni perspective of like what it means to like make content as a music creator. And I feel like, and it's not a knock on the music scene currently. I do think it's a really good music scene. Dare I say better than the LA music scene. But a lot of people are still kind of stuck, in the prehistoric era of music, which is I want to like play guitar and that's it. I want to play drums. That's it. And I feel like if you want to have any kind of success in the music scape nowadays, you have to be able to do a lot of different things and not just the tech stuff on the back end, but also the social media on the front end. And then just to think outside the box, like so many like metal bands have like someone dying in their music video or blood or whatever. And just, thinking outside the box, being willing to take risks. And I think that's kind of where I feel unconventional because, if you've heard, like Empires of Delirium, it's very much unconventional. It's a bass, vocals, and drums. And then the same thing musically for Ghostmade Cellophane, which is like, right now, like hip hop songwriters and like any kind of really heavy metal is doing well in Minnesota. And it's a more melodic, ambient soundscape, but heavy vibe. And I think just coming in with that different perspective has set me apart in either band that I decide to make a focal point.
That's really cool. In looking at that, so you talked about having these different skills, like the video editing, the Photoshop, like, and then getting used to and like being really present on social media. Because I noticed that I'm like, damn, John's got this figured out. Like I'm sitting there like for my own business, sitting and taking notes, even though it's not necessarily promoting music, but like taking note of how somebody like you is able to bring that forward. What was that path like for you to learn how to balance all of these different roles, or how to start to even just learn how to effectively edit a video or make a social media post? What was that process like for you?
Honestly, it was really interesting. I've always been a huge fan of film. So that was kind of my path as far as like, okay, well, I did like maybe like a year and a half of film in college, and then like a semester of web design and like a year of photography and Photoshop. And like, it was interesting because when I took the classes, I wasn't really good at it. And then as I wanted to focus on music, and, you probably, I don't know if you've experienced this, but people want to like charge you so much money for content. And it's, especially like when I lived out in LA, it was just like everybody was just taking advantage of, there's like a stereotype for musicians out in LA. It's the person who knows like 3 guitar chords and has a lot of money. And so that person, it's like, oh yeah, I'll pay $1,000 for this person to do this photo shoot for me, and $5,000-$6,000 for that person to do that video for me. And, for me as a blue collar person, it's not really realistic. So I kind of went through and sucked at it for probably a good 2 or 3 years. I went back and looked at photos recently, and I was like, in videos, and I was like, man, like, using Final Cut Pro X and like those videos, like someone can make a better video now on their phone than, the numerous hours I spent on that one very poorly edited video. So, it's weird for me because I started from a place of, well, I don't have any other path because I can't afford to pay people to do stuff for me. And then you kind of, when I have done that, it's out of your hands. And I could speak about that here in a sec, but
Yeah.
To be on the flip side of sucking and then having people come up to me and like I've had bands locally ask me to like film videos for them and or do content for them, and that is encouraging because it tells me that I'm doing something right as far as that aspect. Creating something that looks professional, which I think is really important, and I think really separates, you know, a band that's going to be a local band with no endpoint versus a band that, you know, could go on tour, you know. And there's exceptions obviously, but so that's been really interesting for me. But yeah, I always ask people, I lean on people, like, you know, I ask Jay a lot of questions.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So but yeah, do you want me to expand on that at all, or
If you'd like to, I think that's really great. And like the lesson that I'm hearing from you on that is something I talk about with people that I work with, and I hear this reinforced for me by like the coaches and mentors that I have in my life as well. Like, yeah, the first time you do something, it's not going to be great, or you're going to look back at it and go, "Ooh, that was woof." But that's the point of growth, and that's the point of being able to get better. It's like we have this weird, this like strange notion in our head that like, oh, I can't let anybody see this because I want my first time to be perfect, or I want my the first thing I put out to be the most perfect thing ever. It's like look at some of like your favorite bands or like your favorite artists and whatnot, and how many of them really love their like first albums? Like still like
a lot of them
truly actually love them. And it'd be like, you look at, you look at big bands like Metallica, and like they wrote a lot of their first stuff before they were even 18. Like it's like, yeah, they still play it and it's like, it still hits, but like they're so far removed from who they were when they wrote those things, or like the quality of the songwriting, or even looking to somebody like Glenn Danzig, who just wanted to completely have nothing to ever do with the Misfits ever again, because that was his high school band. Like, of course he moved on and beyond that. And so I think it's really cool for you to reiterate that, like, it's a process of getting more reps in. It's a process of continual improvement, that yes, your first product and your first post or your first video is going to be not as great. And if you keep going, you're going to get to a point like John just talked about, where people are going to be asking you like, hey, how do I do this? Hey, could you help me with this? Would you would you film a video for me or do my social posts for me? Like, you never know where those things may take you.
Yeah. And it's not just like at the beginning, you know, of like adulthood or life when people have that struggle. I think, you know, I feel that way anytime you start a new project, you know, especially if it's like something that you've never like expanded on previously. Like for me, I kind of grew up listening to like pop and punk and hip hop. It was a weird combination of stuff. And never, like when I first got into music, it was pop punk, and then it became like screamo. Everybody says Deftones. Even though I didn't know who the Deftones were when we recorded the album like 5 years ago. But anyways, you know, like with the Empires of Delirium stuff, I never ever wrote music in that genre in my life or sang in that style. And it was really infuriating for me to like go up on stage and like people who paid their hard-earned money to come out and then just not put a performance on that I was happy with. And I feel that way too about Ghostmade. I feel like it's been really interesting for me because like every show we get better, and I'm realizing it at a faster pace than I did with Empires. But I think that's part of the process of like, you know, I hadn't touched that band in, you know, 4 years or whatever, you know, basically since I came back from LA. So to pick it back up, and regardless of what project or what venture you do, you're going to fall flat on your face. You know, if I wanted to go do web design or start a tech company tomorrow, like I would probably have a good couple of years of struggling until I could figure out, oh, like this is, these are the pieces that I need to know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's speaking to something that's really important for, it's a good reinforcement for me of starting a new business, and we want that like overnight success. And it's like, keep showing up, keep putting the reps in. The days where you feel like, do I even know what I'm doing anymore? Like that self-doubt. No, like those are the days that are golden, especially when you continue going and you're like, there's not that, the path forward is, I have that choice. I can stop, I could take a break, but I can still keep going. And it's that continual push forward that gets us to that point where, like you're talking about, of being able to look back and see the successes, or being able to realize that, I've done this with another band already. So I know some of the pitfalls, or I know some of the places where I can keep myself focused and keep it moving. And so things move at a much more accelerated pace because you've already done it before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It just makes life more exciting. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
Going and starting ventures, or like watching and being a part of something and helping it grow is exciting. Because like you said, you could stop, you could take a break, or you could keep going. And if you stop, you don't ever know where it's going to end up at and what experiences you might have, good, bad, or in between. And I've learned it definitely in the past where when I've chosen to stop, I've pretty much always regretted, minus college.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah.
Cool. In looking at this, because you have quite a few creative skills behind what you've been bringing to the world. Were you always a creative kid? Was this something that you were drawn to early on, or is this something that has evolved for you over a longer period of time?
Well, it's kind of twofold. I've always been interested in like creative stuff, but I never really did it. And there's multiple factors to it. We were really poor growing up at times. I remember like having to ask the teacher to borrow like a piece of paper and a pencil and writing and like using every corner of that piece of paper because I didn't want to ask for another piece of paper because it was too embarrassing, Mm-hmm. And so we didn't really get the opportunity when I was younger, and neither did we have a lot of people in my life that were, creatively adventurous. My brother he sings, not in bands, but he sang in choir, and then, he sing whenever there's like a event, he's always singing for like a wedding or something. Mm-hmm. And then, my grandma played piano, but I never really got to see her play piano. She just had it in her house. My great grandma, I should say, had it in her house and like stopped playing it by the time I was old enough to understand why it was there, Mm-hmm. That's literally it. My mom wasn't a really creative person. She was a, single parent with 5 kids. So didn't really have time for that. And, mm-hmm. But I was always jealous of the musicians that were around me, like I wish I could afford to have a guitar, or like, we grew up in Minneapolis, but we moved to Lake Park, Minnesota, which is over by Detroit Lakes.
Oh yeah. Part of my family's from Lake Park. So.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. What part? Like, are you, yeah.
So it'd be my mom's mom's side.
Okay.
Yeah. So, great grandparents are buried out there. So yeah.
Oh wow.
Been out there a couple times.
Is it the cemetery right outside of right outside town on the left hand side?
Yep. Yeah. Like the northwest side of town. Yep. Yeah.
We lived on 2nd Street for quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the main street. Yeah. But mm-hmm. And then we lived out, I think it's County Road 5.
Okay.
Maybe I'm wrong. it's been so long since I've been out there, but yeah, there's no music shops over there.
Yeah, no,
if I,
yeah,
yeah, no,
you gotta travel quite a ways to be able to get into some of that stuff. Yeah.
yeah. In like, I mean, Detroit Lakes used to have a music shop and a bookstore, and I remember being probably about 16, 17, working at Godfather's Pizza
Mm-hmm.
and walking across the street and spending my $50, $60 I made on that paycheck for some comic books, and some like CDs. Like that was like my step into like the creative world. And, I'm old enough, and I'm not old, and Jay and I are, the same age. I'm a few months older, but, the internet wasn't always a big thing when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And when we did have it was dial up,
Yeah. Especially
And
living in a rural Midwestern, like it just wasn't. In small towns, like it just wasn't as important. Versus if you were in a larger city, it's like, oh, that was much earlier adoption of using those tools for business or creativity or whatever. Yeah.
yeah. And I would say it wasn't until about 20 to 21 that I actually really started to like, you know, try like doing music. I remember like I bought my first guitar. It was a blue Epiphone Les Paul Studio for like $329 from Best Buy when they used to sell music gear.
Yep.
And and I there's a song called One Last Breath by Creed. And I remember my friend showed me how to play it, and I spent probably 5 or 6 hours trying to play that intro, and I couldn't figure it out. So that's how terrible I was. But you start, and then you expand yourself. I think the biggest thing is for me, and I encourage people who are creative to do this, but to go out and travel and like see how other places in the country or the world are doing stuff. And like, you're going to grow a lot, because, like people might think of like Minneapolis, St. Paul as being a really big area, but like, there's limitations and, I feel like we're behind other parts of the country as far as technology goes. And even like, I remember like going to college here and then going out to, do a year of college in Los Angeles. And like, I was like, holy shit. Like the textbooks that we're learning from are like 15 to 20 years behind, like what's actually going on right now.
Yeah.
And so, and on top of that, like most of my classes out there didn't use textbooks. Everything was on your computer. You logged into like a server, and it was a lot easier for people to be able to study on like an iPad, versus like an actual hard copy textbook, and so, I would have never had that growth had I not went out and ventured to some place new,
Yeah. What was the driver, or what was the inspiration to go from the Minneapolis area to study in LA? What drove you there?
It's actually kind of a funny story. So I was going to Minnesota State University, Moorhead, and I was I knew I didn't want to be up there. Fargo, Moorhead for me is just not the place for me. Never really has been. Sorry, my cat wants to so loud. But so I remember going into a professor's office. Dr. Carter was his name, and I sat in the front row for 2 years in his classes and aced every single class and every single test. And in the hallways, he'd pretend like he didn't know who I was. But he just this ego thing, and he picked his favorites. And no offense to Dr. Carter, he's a very successful musician in his own right, and a better musician than I could probably ever hope to be. But at least from a traditional standpoint. But I went to his office one day, and I was considering Texas, actually, because I had relatives in Texas. And, I got accepted to the University of Texas in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to his office and I just said, hey, can I borrow like 5 minutes of your time? And he's like, sure, And I was like, and I sat down and I was like, I know you and I have never really seen eye to eye, and we've never really had conversations, aside from answering questions in class. And, but I respect you because you're a brutally honest person. And so I just asked him, I was like, I got accepted to the University of Texas, was considering doing an exchange program and then finishing my college there. What do you think? And then he just kind of sat there, leaned back in his chair, put a pen to his mouth, and he's just kind of thinking. And he leans forward and he's like, I think that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. It's like, I was like, oh. And then he let it pause there for a little bit because he's a good storyteller. And he goes, from what I gather, you don't really care to do traditional music. I was like, no, not really. I've done film scoring and written for podcasts, but I don't want to be in an orchestra or teacher. So, and he's like, if you go to Texas, I promise you this, like you are going to find yourself in the same position that you are here, which from what I gather is unhappy. He's like, if you really want to test yourself, he's like, I taught at, California State University before, he's like, go out to LA, find out if you can swim with the sharks, and you're going to find out really quickly whether or not you have what it takes to have any kind of, career in music. And I took that advice. I was just like, all right. And the story goes, is bought a one-way plane ticket to Los Angeles. Had enough money for 3 days of staying in a hotel. And if I went beyond the 3 days, I wouldn't have enough money to put money towards an apartment or room for rent. Like my budget was literally 3 days. If it didn't work in 3 days, I'd be taking what money I had left to buy a plane ticket back.
Yep.
I had like $1,000 to my, not even $800. And so, yeah, plane ticket within 3 days, got registered for classes and got a job and found a place to be. And mind you, at that point in time, I didn't even have a car. So to be able to go from like LAX, we California State University, Northridge is deep in the valley. So you're talking 30 something miles from LAX to deep in the valley, and to be able to figure out in a city that I'd never been in, and so it takes a lot of resolve, and most people would probably break. I have siblings who I've tried to encourage to like come to the cities, and like there's just no way, to them, Minneapolis, St. Paul is just too big.
Way too scary.
Way too scary. And I'm just, it is a scary place. Don't get me wrong. The only place, and I've been, to New York just twice this year for, good almost 2.5 weeks. And obviously like 5.5 years in LA, and Minneapolis is probably the one place that I've been where I'm like, I need to watch when I get into my car. I need to make sure I lock stuff, watch around me, like, because I know, and having grown up here, there's a lot of violence here, and I've never felt more unsafe than, being here, just because I think a lot of people are angry here.
Yeah.
So it's a beautiful, it's a beautiful, ugly thing, and I remember like when I went to LA, people were like, why are you so angry all the time? And I'm like, I'm trying not to be.
Yeah.
Like,
we become the reflection of what we surround ourselves with in a lot of ways. And so if you're surrounded by a bunch of angry people, you tend to be a bit of an angry person.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. There's there's some interesting, like, I'm going to butcher these things because I don't have them right at my fingertips, but there's research that shows like if your best friend's friend is a smoker, you're much more likely to be a smoker, even though you may not even know who that person is. You may have never even talked to them before, but because of that associative effect, because your best friend is subtly influenced by their friend who smokes, and that starts to bring that behavior into you as well.
It's funny that you say that because like the older I've gotten, the smaller my circle gets.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I mean, these people, but like I'd probably say on a daily or weekly basis, I'll talk to Corey, I'll talk to Chris. Corey not so much because I know he's traveling right now, but Jay probably almost every other day. My girlfriend Trinity, my mom, like I'll talk to people who like will be honest with me / build me up and like inspire me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think that's so important because like, I couldn't imagine being the same person that hung out with, a decade later or whatever, after high school, hung out with the same people in the same small town. If you want to be creative, if you want to be strong, if you want to be your weirdest self, using some words there, like find the people who like, will allow you to do that and kind of, stick to them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's, I think, that's a big part of success too, is just, knowing who you can go to for an honest, but like slightly cushioned perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the people that'll give it to you real, in for me, I've been deep in the self-development world and consuming a lot of that type of content and just learning a lot of the things like we just talked about. But it's finding the people that will call you forward, the people who will challenge you. Like one of the coolest parts is for me, I was meeting with the former owner of the gym that I worked with last week, and was working through some ideas for my own business and some different directions that I want to go with it. And we started talking through one, and she was helping guide me through, like asking questions about where I was going with this. And I said I had two paths, and we were feeling really good about that one. She's like, "Well, what's the second one?" And I tell her the idea, and she's like, "No, just no." She's like, "That's the same. That's the same thing you've been struggling with right now that hasn't been working for you. This other option is something that's completely different from what you've been struggling with." Mm-hmm. So, like, why would you believe that doing the exact same thing with just a different lipstick on the pig is going to make it less of a pig? Like, maybe select the one that isn't a pig. You're speaking in some abstracts here, but like being able to have those people in our lives is drastically underrated. People get really, really comfortable in their comfort zones of the people who are going to just tell them it's just all right, or you'll figure it out, no big deal. Yeah, and meanwhile you're still stuck in that space of how I don't like. You feel stuck in that. It's great to have that cheerleader for you, but having those people that can call you forward or call you on your own bullshit, where you're like, do you really think that's a great idea? Or, hey, I see you actually succeeding in this, going this direction more versus this direction. And being able to like point out those things that we don't see for ourselves. Super underrated, super important.
Yeah, I've noticed that a lot with my girlfriend. I'll be doing a song or like working on something, and she'll just be like, "Oh, I really like that," or like we had rehearsal and I was just trying something different, and she just like was just, "I don't like that no." Like, and then she had recorded it, and I disagreed with her at the time because like, nah, like I was feeling it. Mm-hmm. And then I went back and watched the video, and I was like, oh shit, like she's right. Like I was so it just didn't make sense at all, So, that's been really nice, especially because like we live together and I get that on like a daily basis of encouragement, but like perspective, and yeah, that's been really nice.
Yeah, it's really cool. And also, I want like bringing up something that you had talked about earlier of like, things perhaps in certain music scenes or certain groups, really struggling to like step outside of that box where like everything starts to sound the same, or they're running. It's almost like they're running a play out of a playbook of like how to be a band. Like they're following a step-by-step guide. Everybody starts to sound the same. Like, I was just watching a video last week with Glenn Fricker from Supernatural Studios, that everybody uses, as far as guitar players go, everybody uses the same speaker. Everybody wants to use a Celestion Vintage 30, and so then everybody starts sounding exactly the same because that's what's predictable. That's what they know from the records that they like, so that they can emulate those. But we end up in this space of everything feeling homogenized and not creative. And to what we've been speaking on of like how much impact has it been for you to surround yourself with musicians and creative people who have very different tastes or very different perspectives? How has that influenced your ability to create, or your ability to create something different that isn't quite as mainstream or quite as easily defined?
Honestly, it's been interesting. Like I said, I feel like I grew up listening. Like, if I talk to like other hard rock metal like musicians or bands in the tri-state area, a lot of them would probably say certain similar bands that they like or they listened to growing up, and then I'm over here like, oh, why? I listened to like Michael Jackson and like David Bowie, which I think some people might list, Smashing Pumpkins. Like, I had such a different. I had to like learn how to like live within the spectrum of like what music is popular now, if that makes sense. And it's been really interesting to ask people like, does this make sense? Because like, I feel like I'm writing it from, perspective of someone who like, loves that type of music. And then, grew up listening and just adoring soundtrack music, I love like film scores and stuff. So it's been different because like for some people, it's like they look for other people to like give them different perspective. For me, I've had that, but I've also had people like where I'm like, does this make sense? Because I don't, it's like I'll use like 30 Seconds to Mars, for example. So like they came out in early 2000s. And I don't know if you're familiar with like their catalog, like the first album. And
I was actually regional director of their street team for the upper Midwest.
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
So I'm familiar. I'm very familiar with the 30 Seconds to Mars.
Okay. That was back beautiful.
In like, yeah.
So the music that they came out with at the time, there's aspects of stuff that's, similar to other genres. You got a little bit of Deftones in there. You got a little bit of like butt rock in there. And then obviously aesthetically in the early 2000s, they were kind of fitting in with that black eyeliner look. But even from the first album to like their most recent album, it's like they're somewhat similar to like what's going on in the music scene right now, but they're so dramatically different. Like if you, what is that song? It's like a 7-minute song on their first album. Buddha's for Mary.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Like that doesn't really like when that came out, like there are not a lot of other bands that sounded like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
well, it had a bit of what you're talking about of like some ambient soundscapey types of, and then just like different twists and turns that went along with it. Well, but it still maintained like one melodic through line during the whole thing. But it wasn't your typical like 4 chords, then we get a breakdown, and then like a sweeping chorus. It was a little bit. It was much more different than what was being brought forward as like pop radio or like
Yeah.
popular rock or modern rock, however you want to classify that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel like that's been my because like like in the earlier stuff, like a lot of their stuff was like chop D tuning and just open 5-3, whatever. But that was like the similarity that would like connect them to what was going on musically, but everything else was different. And they didn't really grow up listening to like they grew up as artists and like enjoying all different types of music, not just rock, and so yeah, there's definitely like even like for Ghostmade Cellophane, like in 2024, I want to do like a lot more like metalcore stuff and like just because this is my first like official year of playing music like in Minnesota ever, which is crazy. And I've noticed like what seems to go over a lot more than others. And like the ambient stuff that we're doing with Ghostmade with the screaming and stuff, like some of it went over well, some of it not so much. And I still love to do it, but I was like, I'm going to write 2 EPs, one in continuing the journey that I'm on right now, but another that's like just straight up like hard rock and metalcore. And like, cause I like when we played like the one song that would be in that genre, like Mankato, like was like the first time people ever moshed, that was really cool. And then we played the rest of the set and they just kind of stood there.
Yeah.
So, it's knowing how to like cater to your audience, and it's okay to, to sound similar at times because like that's what people know, and then sprinkle in some difference, or do something similar that they know, but in a different way. Yeah, it's I'm the annoying person that I have a few people that I like continuously send shit to, and they're like, this sounds very similar to what you just did, but like, I'm like, but don't you hear the difference? And they're like, oh my God, like,
yeah.
So, yeah.
All the things that when we're so close to it that we hear all the nuance, but the person who's on the outside, they don't know quite that difference. It's like, to put it in guitar gear terms, it's like, well, I swapped out my tube screamer for a big muff, and like expecting everybody to notice the big difference in my tone. And meanwhile, nobody actually, aside from maybe the couple of guitar dorks in the audience, they're like, oh, it sounds like a distorted guitar either way.
Yeah.
They don't hear that subtle sonic difference the same way that we do as creators. Like they don't see the sonic coloration quite the same way. But I think that's that's what's really cool about like having gotten to know you over this past almost a year or so, is that I think that's really cool that you have that ability to notice and pick up what's going on with the audience and be able to be open enough to say, all right, how can I still express myself? How can I still be creative within what I want to do, but be accessible to the people that I want to have experienced what I'm doing. So I think it's very easy for artists to say, no, I'm going to do it exactly only my way. And if they don't like it, then that's something, well, screw all of them, or that's something that's wrong with them, that they don't quite get it. Or whatever that story that we can tell ourselves is. But for hearing you say that of being continually in the crafting of the music, like that's something so cool that I don't hear from very many artists very often.
Thanks, man. It's if you want to get there, you got to keep climbing up the mountain, man. You can't like go up 1,000 feet and be like, oh yeah, well, I'm just going to wait until the next time I decide to, make another, incline. And so, you always, and, like the people who like to do like free soloing or climbing mountains, like they might go up that same mountain a couple of different ways and find different paths. And, that was, I think that's the beauty of art, is it's ever changing. And I mean, that's like for me, like like I have obviously have Empires of Delirium, but that's why that's been so quiet so lately, because like it's like I busted my ass for that band for 3 years. Filmed music videos, threw money at it, developed a sound with a bass guitar that sounds like a guitar, basically Royal Blood. Or actually, the first person who showed me the octave thing was Jay with Anomic.
Yep.
I was like, how the fuck does she did, right?
Which I introduced him how to do that with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a whole story in that one, because I didn't like the drummer. So I was playing bass for Anomic at the time, and I didn't really get on with the drummer that we had. And so I was like, you would be better off doing this as a 2-piece. And so here's how you can do that.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you for that inspiration years later. Yes.
Yeah.
You didn't even know. Yeah.
Well, it's like what we talked about, that ripple effect is like, had I not shown him how to do that, you wouldn't have maybe had that sonic coloring, or like that sonic paintbrush or crayon box, whichever metaphor you want for it. You wouldn't have even had the access to it necessarily, or maybe you would have stumbled upon it later. But yeah, it's always fun to see what those ripple effects have, and like what you are doing, and the way that you show up in the various music scenes, of like what sorts of ripples and what sorts of people your performances may influence how they show up. Like,
yeah, it's really interesting. And it's, we had, I think when I first officially met you, because I had heard about you like a lot in the past, was the July show that we played in St. Paul.
Yep.
And like, I hadn't played Ghostmade stuff in, like I said, 4 years, right? Like we had a month and a half to prep, and I didn't even remember most of the songs. Like, so we were like figuring out as we go, and it wasn't the most polished performance, but it had a beginning and an end that was very, there was an arc to it that's, made a lot of sense for the musical style. And then it was just very like cathartic and honest. And like from that, like we've gotten, I've been offered probably somewhere between 60 to 80 shows since July.
Wow.
Which is a lot. Yeah. And I can't announce it, but we do have a tour coming up, and I have to figure that part out with the drummer, but I can't officially announce it, but you'll see.
Okay. Cool.
But I've had to turn down more shows than I've accepted by at least fivefold, which is crazy. And only because if it were up to me, I would be playing every single one of them. But when you're in a band, you got to go with what works for people's schedules, and, but we've somewhere between 60 to 80 shows over the course of July, August, like 5 months, 6 months.
That's impressive for any band. Like
it's a lot. It was a lot. Yeah. It sucks, man. I've had to say, like, just in December alone, probably 12 shows I had to say no to. Mm-hmm. And I'm very blessed that like, people think of us and want to have us on a show, regardless of how good or bad the performance might be on the last show, because we run a lot of backing tracks and we don't have in-ear monitor system. So we are for a while, we were at the mercy of whatever sound engineer was working that bar. And, we've shown up to bars and venues with no monitors on stage.
Yep.
And I'm like, how the fuck do I hear my backing track? And so I actually went and bought like, I guess it's like 4 15-inch speakers with tweeters and 3 12-inch speakers. And then we use the 15 as monitors. So like, I just kind of got to the point where I'm like, I can't afford to throw a couple $1,000s at an in-ear, rack. Yep. But, I've got these really nice professional quality PA speakers I could bring with me and use those as monitors.
Yeah. Fill in the mix at least. Yeah. So where you are. Yep.
Yep. And so, but it's anywhere from no monitors to, we had one venue give us one monitor, and I was like, it just, So performances can vary a lot. And,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
you know, I hate it because I want to go out there and I want people to be like, wow, like they're really polished and they sound amazing, but I'm not willing to wait. Like, you know, like you said earlier in the conversation, some people want to wait for the very first experience of when you hear that one song that it's perfect. And then you didn't have that opportunity to grow because you waited all that time. So I don't want to wait till I have money to buy an in-ear rack. I'd rather go make monitors work and continue to grow as much as I can, you know?
Yeah.
So
because there's also no guarantee that playing with in-ears is a whole different skill and things too. Of like, there's no guarantee that it's just going to fix everything for you either. I get to like, I think it's so cool that you're doing stuff like that because it, you know, it reminds me of, you know, while I'm not an ancient old geezer by any stretch of the imagination, but like the just the reminders. I'm laughing and smiling because I'm remembering all of those same struggles that you're talking about. In like the first band that I really played in, we were doing something very different than everybody else because we had, you know, this is 2004. We had backing tracks. We had no amps. We were running everything direct through Line 6 pods. So as a bass, we had no drummer because everything was programmed. So it was a singer, a guitar player, and a bass player. And it was cool because we could load everything up and we could tour in a Buick, and we didn't have to have a big van. We didn't have to like we could do things like have a hotel room because we weren't paying out so much in gas. But showing up to shows and they're like, well, this one speaker, this is the entire PA. You're like, what? And like that, those frustrations, I remember those very, very, very vividly of what you're talking about and how creative you get with a solution like you talked about of bringing along your own monitors to be able to hear these things. And I think that's so cool that you're continually building this way to start and keep going rather than wait for the perfect moment, because that's ultimately where all the magic happens anyways.
Yeah. A lot of growth in those imperfect moments. It's like, I don't know, like I got really heavy. We'll talk about like strong and stuff, but, you know, I've been like 170, like most of my life up until I would say 2.5 years ago. Like I've gained like 50, 60 pounds. And, but the struggle is, like going and running 30 minutes on a treadmill. You know what I mean? You're not where you want to be. You're not at the performance that you want to be at or that you're accustomed to. But that 30 minutes of, honestly, for me, it's like the first 12 minutes are like hell. I fucking hate it. And then the rest of it's smooth sailing, you know? You know, that's a big part of the process of anything really, which is if you want to get there, you put in the work, you know?
Well, it's we've talked about this on the podcast many times of like, it's very easy for us to distill like our lives down to like check boxes and like accomplishments and things. And the reality is that all of the magic and all of the memories come from the time that you're spending doing the work, being on the journey versus all of the big achievements. Because how long does that big achievement, let's say you headline a big show, it's like the good feels from that are very small. It's like you get the time doing it and a little bit of the time afterwards, but then it's on to the next one. Because if you just stop there, you're not going to get that next show.
No.
And so it's in that continual process of improvement, that continual tweaking, that continual growth that we find all the magic, which is in the journey itself.
Yeah, 100%. I did want to say this though, is again, the weird and strong, having lived other places and I've spent time in Texas and New York and then lived in LA for a long time. And man, the Midwest is a really weird place.
Yeah, it is.
Not in a negative way, but it's full of a lot of people underground. Like there's a lot of talented people here that just need to be shown, how to like bring that talent out, and I think that's one thing I've appreciated, especially in the last couple of years, which is like, holy shit, like there's a lot I didn't see here before. And so that's been really, really beautiful. And, every place is kind of weird, but I think the Midwest, I mean, when we played that Grand Forks show, there was, what was it? It was a tater tot hot dish.
It was a wild rice soup. I think.
Yeah. Wild rice soup. Yeah. Just, dude, I've never played a show where they had food like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, we did play the 4th of July where they had the steak, but like,
but just to like show up and be like, oh, hey, by the way, there's this nice home cooked meal just waiting in the kitchen for you.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. I think I've talked about this on another episode. I've talked about this for years of like, there's definitely something about northern climates of like, feeling like you're locked up for 6 months out of the year to avoid the outside and avoid the weather, that like, that's where like people become so talented. I mean, is it any wonder that like Bob Dylan and Prince come from Minnesota? Like,
right.
They just had time to spend just working on the music, because if you went outside in February, it's like, could be a death sentence if you're not prepared. Just like, I'll just stay inside and play guitar. Just stay inside and write some songs. Just make that happen. Yeah.
Have you seen The Shining?
Yes.
Okay. So my goal in life is to have enough money for music that I can, sustain from it. Mm-hmm. But in the winter months, I mean, granted, unless I have a lot of money and I go someplace warm, in the winter months to kind of lock myself up, like in The Shining, like, yeah, always there, kind of secluded from everybody in his own thoughts and going mad. I used to be an RA at Minnesota State University, and they would pay, resident assistants to stay over Christmas break, and there's like nobody on campus.
Yeah,
maybe a dozen kids, and but you still had to work the desk, and then you still had to patrol all of the residential buildings and walk, and every once in a while you'll see someone, but like typically all the lights are out, and there's something exciting and like tingling about that feeling of just like almost like post-apocalyptic nothingness. Mm-hmm. That you can kind of really be in your own thoughts in a different kind of way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm.
Because you're in your same environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's kind of spooky that way. I loved that. It used to be. It's not like this anymore, for sure. Like during big holidays, especially during the summer, downtown Fargo-Moorhead, it would be a ghost town. So like 4th of July, like there'd be like 2 bars open and like nobody there. And like those were my favorite, because it's like, even if it was a Saturday night, it would be just a ghost town. And it was interesting to just be able to see that from that lens versus, oh, it's just another Saturday and it's packed full of college kids and they're doing their thing. It's just fun to have that pattern interrupt, like you're talking about.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. As we're coming up on our time together, any final thoughts or any pieces of wisdom that you'd like to share with the Weird and Strong audience?
Let me think about that for a sec.
Yeah.
I would say, honestly, just keep grinding and be willing to step outside your box. You know what I mean? I think that's really important. The more tools you have, the less, like if you want to go hiking with just, one, like in the mountains in the winter with just like one tool, you bring several. You bring a shovel, you bring, snowshoes, you bring a tent, you bring stuff to light a fire, stuff in case there's an emergency, flares. Like, if you really want to succeed, I'm using this reference because I'm thinking about it's December, and like every December, I think about we did 10,000 feet in Yosemite. So we like slept on the side of the mountain, which is beautiful in the winter. And I've been thinking about that we did it over Christmas, like, I don't know, probably 7 years ago, 8 years ago. But, you wouldn't do that journey with just one tool. You would learn multiple tools and know how to use them. And, I think that, I think in today's climate, that's kind of what you got to do. And, there's technology that's there, and, that's a guide for how to use those tools. And aside from that, check out Ghostmade Cellophane. Everything except for Spotify at the moment, because we don't have Spotify, which is ironic with everything going on. And and then feel free to check out Empires of Delirium. And I do have a production company called Skeleton Structure Productions that I do photography and video and stuff like that through. So
awesome. Yeah, we'll have links to all of that in the show notes for anybody who wants to check those things out, which I would highly recommend. So as we wrap up, thanks, John, so much for jumping on the podcast with me. It's always a pleasure getting to talk to you, and I'm so grateful for you willing to jump on and have this conversation. And I'm just grateful for you being you, because you're a super rad dude.
Thanks, man. Honestly, man, I appreciate you a lot, because I feel like you're a very inspiring person to be around.
Thank you.
And you're doing what's very authentic to who you are. And, I think that we need more people like that. So, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, awesome. And thank you all for listening to this episode. We appreciate you coming all the way to the end. And as always, folks, stay strong. And most importantly, stay weird.